Well, I'm really interested in this because I love like crime shows, but I also love history shows. And now this is kind of a cool mix.
Perfect.
So tell me how it came all about, you know?
One of the other guys in this room, David Titcher, came to a Canadian production company with this idea. Apparently, in real life, Houdini and Doyle were actually friends, and more fascinating for me, had these very different attitudes about the paranormal and the supernatural. Houdini, a real skeptic, and Doyle believed and hoped.
Yeah.
And I've always been fascinated by both of them, actually. And so they came to this company and had this idea, and they said, "Hey, David Shore would be good for this," and they brought it to me, and I went, "Okay." And it was really actually, most ideas come to you, and you go, "Yeah, there's something in there. There's something." This one was just like, "Oh," it just came to me fully formed. Is like, that's a great idea. Why hasn't anybody done this before?
Exactly. So Houdini's actually doing his stunts in between while trying to follow these crimes and stuff each episode?
A little bit. We're following Houdini. They're both. Houdini's kind of at the peak of his career. He's the most, probably, maybe the most famous man in the world. He's at the time kind of the original. So it's not unreasonable. Most people believe that anything's possible. Just a question of finding the technology, just a question of finding the science, and that's where Doyle's approach was. It's why not? Why not? Let's find
it's
it.
kind of like a little X-Files kind of almost for that time period. And
it's,
it's awesome characters, you know?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's somebody described it as Edwardian X-Files, which I think is rather
Is
appropriate.
it filmed in Vancouver?
Well, that was one of the fun things. No, it was not filmed in Vancouver. We filmed it in Manchester, England, 8 of the episodes, and 2 more in the Toronto area, which was also fun too for me. Get to do some traveling and see some interesting places. The locations were great there. It really was amazing how well our crew could make it look like it was 1901.
All right. So this new show, I love it because I love crime shows, I love history, and it's kind of combining both together and kind of an X-Files kind of spin on it. Kind of thing. So tell me how it came about.
Well, I've been working on this for decades. Like in the late 80s, I think I first came up with the idea. And for many, many years, I was trying to do it as a movie.
Okay.
And every 3 years, I'd whip out the idea and try to figure out what the plot line was going to be. The problem was I always had 10 different plots. And in a movie, you can only do one. And so and I liked them all. I never could figure out what to do. And then finally, a few years ago, it was like, hey, do it as a TV show. So once I decided to do it as a TV show, then it all came together. And in a TV show, you can tell all the stories. So several episodes of our first season are ideas I had 20 years ago to do as a movie. Yeah.
Well, I really liked it because Houdini was really against because at the time period there's always about that big thing about communicating the dead and the tables, and he was trying to rebuke it. So now it's a cool pairing with these characters fighting crime. And does he ever change his mind about certain things?
Houdini?
Yeah.
Houdini would never, even if he did change his mind, he would never let you know that. No, he's very much a skeptic throughout. And then Doyle is at this time, I mean, in the true story, Houdini was basically the biggest skeptic in the entire world. To this day, famous for that. And Doyle was the leading spiritualist. So even though they were friends and then later enemies, they had completely different views, and we tried to capture that. It was sort of a perfect way to do a television series at that time.
Yeah, and it's a cool time period to do. I think to do with it because
Years ago, yeah. Just at that time, it was sort of the first time you could ever talk about the paranormal without being burned at the stake. So
That's a good way to put it.
it was a great. So people were really into it. It was as much as people love it now. I mean, that was a great time. Like at the time, you had seances in the White House, and the Prime Minister of England was doing a seance. Yeah. So people were really into this. I mean, Houdini tried to pass a law against mediums, and the problem was that everybody in Congress had a medium.
Oh,
so
no.
yeah.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Thanks for the history lesson, man. So how did this come about, man? Because I'm a big fan of crime shows and history, and this is kind of get all wrapped up in like kind of a cool X-Files kind of spin to it.
It is. We sort of jokingly refer to it as the Edwardian X-Files. And, you know, it came about because of this little-known fact that Houdini and Doyle were friends in real life for a little while. Friends, and then they became giant enemies when they had a falling out.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's always cool is that they come from sort of the opposite sides of the spectrum that you would expect them, to. So that it turns out that Doyle, who created Sherlock Holmes, the greatest rationalist of all time, was actually a big believer in the paranormal. And Houdini, not really a big surprise when you know that he's a magician, but you realize, oh, Houdini was the debunker, and he actually spent a lot of his career going around debunking mediums and spiritualists and all that stuff. Exactly.
Stuff, you know?
Exactly. But there was a point in their lives when they both were very, very interested in it, and we said, that's a great starting point, and also let's have these two guys come together, and their quest is really for the truth. They want to find the truth wherever that leads. And the other thing that really appeals to me is that we get to delve into what people believe and why. And it's like half of North America believes in ghosts and aliens and angels and demons and all kinds of stuff like that. And it's like, let's explore those beliefs. You know, why do we believe those things? Why do we need to believe them? And are they true?
And it's cool. It's such a cool time period because it's always usually like alien stories around now, or like, but like this is like technology is so new that people back 100 years ago, you know. You got this.
Well, we do an episode about aliens, and and it's pretty cool because it was right around that time that they discovered the telescopes were able to discover the canals on Mars for the first time, and so there was all these rumors in the scientific community of maybe Mars is inhabited. And so, you know, and it was interesting because just the rover, kind of like the same week, came out with some pictures from Mars, and we're like, you know, they were saying, well, maybe there's water crystals and stuff like that on Mars. And we're like, yeah, that's 115 years later, and it's still kind of the same questions we're raising.
Wow, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What's funny, because every time I go to Disneyland and Haunted Mansion, anytime that room with the, you know, the crystal head, I'm always like, oh, Houdini went like this, you know?
I know, yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, Houdini hated all that stuff, and because he was a magician, he knew how tricks are done, you know, so he couldn't be fooled by stuff, and he used to, like, prank and expose mediums. Like, one thing mediums would do is they'd go into a dark room, and everyone would hold hands, and then a trumpet would play out of nowhere. So one thing he did is he put soot on the trumpet beforehand without anyone knowing, and then when the trumpet played, he went over and turned on the lights, and of course the trumpet was replaced over at the wall, but then the medium had black on her hands, or his or her hands, and it was like, you know, caught black-handed. So it's nice.
Clever. So I assume we'll see some of that.
Oh yeah.
Well, the first thing I had to ask you after talking was, I hear one of the stunt persons doing the work got injured on set, huh?
Oh yeah. Well, I had just done the Chinese water torture thing where they dip you head down, tied at your ankles, and you're all shackled up into the tank.
Yeah.
And I just done that, and they assured me that it was completely safe, and I'd done that. It was terrifying, and just as I'm sort of mopping up afterwards, the stunt guy got in there, and he was going all the way down, and they're going to blow out the glass on it. And it was. I mean, we all had our cameras, and we're watching this guy, and 3 tons of water come spilling out, and this guy, he got jacked. It was scary, and he was okay, thank God, because he was great and really brave.
So, I mean, what was it like taking on this, character everyone knows about, everything, where you're, kind of nervous? Well, do I have to do a bunch of stunts, or am I here?
I didn't really have a chance to be nervous. I got the part so fast, and suddenly I was, shooting, a week later. And And so you just sort of do it. You get thrown into it. I'm learning about Houdini as we go, and then they ask, hey, do you want to jump off of this thing? You want to get buried under that thing? And yeah, I guess so. And so you just do it, and it was so much fun, man.
Yeah.
And we're shooting in these like old cities with this incredible architecture, like in Manchester, Liverpool, in the UK. And so you have these amazing sets that sort of extend. You'll come there, and it's such a privilege, man, as an actor. You come there, and they've gravelled off this whole street, and all the buildings look period, and there's the carriage and all the extras. Everyone's dressed up, and then you get to act your little scene, and you're like, oh my God, this is it's a great thing as an actor. You get that chance.
I think it's cool because it's such a cool time period. Yeah. We were just talking the other one. They just sent a telegraph over to the Atlantic Ocean for the first time, and now, we always have aliens and ghost things all take place usually around today, but nothing about that long ago.
Yeah,
so
and that period is great because the general sort of feeling there were ghosts, and mediums were real, and all of that stuff. There was none of the sort of irony and cynicism of today in the same way, and people were open to it in a whole different way. And I think I think there's still that in our society today. There are a lot of unanswered questions. No one really knows what's what.
So I know your character on the show doesn't believe in that, but you personally believe in anything?
I was just telling a couple ladies over there, I'm sort of a pragmatist. I fancy myself a realist, but I've had a couple times in my life where the inexplicable happened, and I was telling them about a story where my big old buddy from New York, we're in Paris, and we're in this old house that was occupied by the Gestapo, where my grandparents died.
Yeah.
And he saw a ghost, and I felt it, and there was something weird at the end of the hallway. I went there a month later, and my girlfriend was freaking out, and we never went back to that house.
I'm the same way, man. I stayed at a house in Boston, and they sort of warned me about, there's this kid ghost here. I'm like, yeah right. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, woke up at night, and I kept hearing these little footsteps going up and down the stairs, like sound like a kid, and I was opening it. There's nothing.
Because you don't know, and you can't tell. You're not sure, and it sort of freaks you out, and then your body is so convinced of it that you're like, all right, I'm just getting out of here.